My boyfriend wanted a traditional wife. I showed him what traditional really meant. Me and Ryan had been dating for 2 years when he started with this traditional talk. Before that, everything was normal. We both worked, split dates, took turns planning stuff. He made decent money doing IT support. I worked at a marketing firm making about the same. We had our own apartments and stayed at each other's places a few nights a week. We talked about moving in together next year. Then Ryan started following these podcasts about how men were losing their masculinity and society was falling apart because women didn't know their place anymore. At first, I thought he was joking when he'd mention stuff from them. But then he got serious. Said he wanted a traditional relationship where the woman cooks, cleans, takes care of her man. I laughed and asked if he was planning to support us entirely on his salary then. He said that wasn't the point. Modern tradition meant we both work, but the woman still does the home stuff because that's biological or whatever. I asked what the man does in this modern traditional setup. He said the man leads, makes decisions, protects. Asked him to protect me from the spider in his bathroom last week, and he made me kill it because he doesn't do bugs. Real protective. Things got worse after he met up with some guys from these online forums. Came back talking about how I needed to learn to be more feminine, submit to male leadership, stop trying to be a man. I asked what that meant exactly. He said I should be cooking his meals when I come over, cleaning his apartment, doing his laundry. Said good women take care of their men without being asked. I pointed out he lives like a slob, has pizza boxes from 3 weeks ago on his counter, and owns 2 plates total. He said that's because he hasn't had a good woman to create a home for him. The next time I went to his place, he'd bought an apron. Not for him, for me. Pink with ruffles. Said he got it so I could start practicing being a proper girlfriend. His sink was full of dishes. Bathroom was disgusting. Sheets probably hadn't been washed in months. He sat on the couch waiting for me to start cleaning. I left and went home. He texted saying I was being selfish and needed to learn about sacrifice in relationships. Started sending me articles about feminine duties and how career women were unhappy because they were fighting nature. His friend Todd told him about this girl who quit her job to serve her boyfriend full-time and how happy they were. I knew that girl. She was depressed and her boyfriend was unemployed, living off her savings from before she quit. But Ryan thought it was goals. He started criticizing everything I did. My cooking wasn't homemade enough even though he lived on energy drinks and microwave burritos. Said I dressed too masculine in my work clothes, should wear dresses more. Bought me a bunch of dresses that looked like sister-wife uniforms. When I didn't wear them, he said I wasn't trying in our relationship. The breaking point was when he invited his forum buddies over to watch sports. Told me to serve them food and drinks. Wear that stupid apron. I asked if he was serious. He said this was my chance to show I could be a good traditional woman. Said his friends' girlfriends did this naturally without complaining. I knew for a fact Todd's girlfriend left him last month and Jake's girlfriend was fictional. But I played along. Told Ryan I wanted to try being more traditional, see if those podcasts were right. His whole face lit up. Thought he'd finally won. I said if we're being traditional, I needed some things from him first. Asked for money for groceries since traditional men provide. He gave me $40 for food for 8 guys. I said traditional men give their women proper household budgets. He said 40 was enough. I said I'd need money for a new dress since he wanted me looking feminine. He said I should use my own money for that. Traditional men buy their women's clothes, but okay. Day of the event, I showed up in jeans and a t-shirt with 2 bags from the dollar store. Had crackers, the cheapest cheese I could find, and a case of the nastiest generic soda that tastes like cough syrup. His friends showed up expecting wings and beer. I served them stale crackers on paper plates I found in Ryan's cabinet from some kid's birthday party with dinosaurs on them. Warm soda in coffee mugs because he only had 3 cups. They kept looking at Ryan like, what is this? He pulled me aside asking where the real food was. I said $40 doesn't buy traditional hosting food. Maybe he should have provided better like a traditional man. He had to order pizzas with his credit card while his friends watched. Then I sat down with them instead of serving, and he stared at me with anger. Todd grabbed his jacket and muttered something about an early morning. Jake followed right behind him without even looking at me. The other guys shuffled out fast, barely saying goodbye to Ryan. The door clicked shut, and suddenly the apartment felt way too small. Ryan turned on me with this look I'd never seen before, like actual rage mixed with embarrassment. He wanted to know why I humiliated him in front of his friends like that. His voice got loud and his face was red. I stayed calm and reminded him that $40 doesn't buy wings and beer for 8 people. If he wanted me playing traditional housewife, he needed to play traditional provider first. That's how it actually works in those arrangements he kept talking about. Ryan started pacing around his messy living room, kicking an empty pizza box out of his way. He said I was twisting everything on purpose. Traditional doesn't mean he has to pay for everything, just that I should want to take care of him without keeping score like some kind of accountant. I pointed out he literally gave me a budget of $40 and expected me to make it work, which is exactly keeping score. Then I asked what he actually contributes to this traditional arrangement besides criticism. He stopped pacing and stared at me like I'd slapped him. I waited for an answer, but he just stood there with his mouth open. Ryan got defensive real quick and started listing things. He said he's the man, he provides leadership, he makes the hard decisions. I asked for specific examples of decisions he's made for us, or problems he's actually solved. He couldn't name a single one. Just stood there looking at the ceiling like the answer might be written up there. The spider incident came up again because it was the perfect example of his leadership in action. He got even angrier and said I was being petty, that I was missing the whole point of masculine energy. Started going on about how it's not about specific tasks, it's about the energy he brings to the relationship. I asked what energy exactly. The energy of sitting on the couch while I clean his apartment? The energy of criticizing my clothes while he wears the same gaming shirt 3 days straight? He told me I was being mean and unfair. Said I used to be nicer before I got so obsessed with equality. I told him I was going home and we needed to seriously think about whether this relationship even makes sense anymore. His whole face changed when I said that. The anger turned into something like panic and he tried to backtrack fast. Said I was overreacting, that we could talk about this like adults. But I was exhausted from the whole night and just wanted to leave. I grabbed my purse and walked out while he was still talking. He followed me to the door saying we should talk more, but I kept walking to my car. The next morning, I woke up to a long text from Ryan. My phone showed a wall of blue text bubbles that I had to scroll through. He apologized for getting angry last night, but then spent 3 paragraphs explaining why modern relationships need more structure and traditional roles. Said he'd been doing research and thinking a lot about masculine and feminine polarity. Suggested we read some articles together so I could understand what he meant. The idea of sitting down to read his podcast guru articles made me want to throw my phone across the room. I put my phone face down on my nightstand and got ready for work instead. At lunch, I met up with Hannah from my department at the usual sandwich place down the street. She asked how things were going, and I just started explaining everything. The podcasts, the apron, the sports night disaster, all of it. Hannah listened while eating her turkey sandwich, and when I finished, she asked why I was still with someone who wants a servant instead of a partner. Hearing it said so plainly by someone else made something click in my brain. She was right. That's exactly what he wanted. Not a girlfriend, not even a traditional wife, really. Just someone to clean up after him and make him feel important. Hannah said she'd dated a guy like that once and leaving him was the best decision she ever made. I sat there picking at my salad thinking about how absurd this whole situation had become. That evening, Ryan called wanting to come over to my place. I told him I needed more space to think about things. He got frustrated immediately and said I was punishing him, that a good girlfriend would want to work through problems together, not shut him out like this. I said I wasn't shutting him out. I just needed time to think without him trying to convince me of stuff. He asked how much time, and I said I didn't know yet. The call ended awkwardly with neither of us saying goodbye, just silence, and then I hung up. I spent that weekend at Liliana's place, my best friend since college. She has this great apartment with huge windows and plants everywhere. We sat on her couch drinking wine Friday night, and I told her everything. Liliana listened and then said something that made me stop mid-sip. She pointed out that Ryan only started this traditional nonsense after his job performance review went badly back in July. He'd gotten passed over for a promotion he really wanted, and had been weird ever since. She thinks he's trying to feel powerful in his relationship because he feels powerless at work. I hadn't connected those dots before, but she was completely right. The timeline matched up perfectly. Sunday evening, I was back at my apartment making dinner when someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Ryan standing there holding flowers and wearing an apron. Not the pink ruffled one he'd bought me, but a plain blue one that looked new. I opened the door cautiously, and he said he wanted to cook dinner for me to prove he values partnership. Part of me wanted to slam the door, but I was curious if he'd actually had some self-awareness, or if this was another manipulation. I let him in, and he went straight to my kitchen, pulling ingredients out of a grocery bag. He'd brought stuff for pasta and kept talking while he cooked about how he'd been thinking all weekend. The dinner came out okay. Nothing special but edible. We sat down at my small table and it was awkward from the first bite. Ryan kept trying to steer the conversation toward how we could blend traditional and modern values. Find some middle ground that worked for both of us. But when I pressed him on specifics, it still sounded like me doing all the domestic work while we both have jobs. He talked in circles about complementary roles and natural strengths until I finally asked him directly what he actually wanted. He got quiet and looked at his pasta. Then he admitted he mostly just wants someone to take care of his apartment and cooking because he's bad at both and doesn't want to learn. There it was. The real truth under all the masculine energy talk and traditional values nonsense. He just wanted a maid he could sleep with. I put my fork down and looked at him across the table. The pasta sat there getting cold between us while he waited for me to say something nice about his effort. I told him I wasn't interested in being his mother or his maid anymore. He needed to learn to clean and cook for himself like an actual adult, instead of expecting me to do it. Ryan's face changed and he looked hurt in a way that almost made me feel bad. He said I was being cruel and that partners help each other with weaknesses. I asked if that went both ways because I hadn't seen him helping with any of my weaknesses lately, just pointing them all out. He started to argue, but I kept going. Asked him what he even wanted from me anymore besides free housekeeping. The question hung there, and I realized I didn't actually know if I wanted anything from this relationship at all. We sat in silence for what felt like forever. Ryan stared at his plate, and I could see on his face that he understood I was seriously thinking about ending things. He reached across the table like he wanted to take my hand, but stopped halfway. Asked if we could just talk about this more tomorrow when we weren't both tired. I said sure, but my voice came out flat. He left soon after without finishing his food, and I threw both our plates in the trash. The next morning started the texts. Ryan sent me good morning messages with heart emojis like nothing was wrong. By lunch, he'd sent me a link to an article about communication in relationships. That evening, he showed up at my apartment with flowers from the grocery store and a card about second chances. I thanked him but didn't invite him in. Over the next week, it got worse. He texted constantly asking how my day was going and telling me he missed me. Sent me pictures of meals he'd cooked himself to show he was trying. Bought me a necklace I'd looked at once in a store 3 months ago. Every message ended with some version of him promising to be better, without ever saying what that meant. At work, I kept checking my phone and getting distracted during meetings. My boss Marco noticed on Thursday when I zoned out completely during a client presentation. After the meeting, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee. We sat in the break room and he didn't push but said gently that I seemed like I had a lot on my mind. Told me I should take a personal day Friday to sort out whatever was going on. I took him up on it. Friday morning, I woke up without an alarm and made myself breakfast. Sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and opened a blank document. Started making lists of what Ryan and I were like before all the podcast nonsense versus what we'd become. The before list had things like splitting concert tickets and laughing at stupid movies together, and him bringing me soup when I had the flu. The after list had aprons and criticism and him sitting on his couch waiting for me to clean. The contrast was so clear it actually hurt to see it written out. The guy I fell for 2 years ago who made me laugh and treated me like an equal had been replaced by someone performing a character he thought he was supposed to be. I saved the document and closed my laptop. Spent the rest of the day cleaning my apartment and thinking. Ryan texted asking to meet for coffee on Saturday. I agreed and spent that morning organizing my thoughts so I wouldn't just get emotional and lose track of what I needed to say. We met at the coffee shop near my place. Ryan got there first and already had my usual order waiting at a table by the window. I sat down and wrapped my hands around the cup. Told him I missed who he used to be before all this traditional relationship stuff started. Back when we were actual equals who enjoyed each other's company instead of him constantly judging whether I was feminine enough. Ryan looked down at his coffee and nodded slowly. He was quiet for a long time and then he started talking in this small voice I hadn't heard from him in months. Said he'd been feeling lost and like he wasn't good enough at anything. The podcast made him feel like he finally understood what was wrong with his life. He thought if he could just get our relationship to be more traditional, it would make him feel more like a man and less like a failure. But instead, he just felt angry all the time and didn't know why. His eyes got wet and he wiped at them quickly. I felt something soften in my chest, hearing him actually be vulnerable instead of defensive for once. Reached across the table and touched his hand. Told him maybe he should talk to a therapist about why he was feeling like he wasn't good enough instead of trying to fix it by controlling me. He pulled his hand back at the word controlling and his jaw got tight. But he didn't completely shut down. Said maybe, and that he'd think about it. We sat there finishing our coffee, and then I brought up what I'd been thinking about all week. Said I thought we should take a real break for a month with no contact, so he could figure out his stuff and I could figure out if I even wanted to continue this relationship. Ryan's face went pale and he asked if I was breaking up with him. I said no, but also maybe, and that I needed space to think clearly without him texting me constantly. He looked scared, but after a few minutes, he agreed. We stood up to leave and he tried to hug me. It was awkward and uncertain and felt like it might be goodbye. I walked home alone and felt lighter and sadder at the same time. The next few weeks were strange. I kept reaching for my phone to text Ryan about random things, and then remembering we weren't talking. Went out with Hannah and Liliana more. Focused on work projects I'd been putting off. Started going to the gym again in the mornings before work. Hannah commented one day at lunch that I seemed more like myself. Liliana said the same thing when we got drinks that Friday. It was telling that multiple people noticed I was different without Ryan around. I slept better and stopped feeling like I was walking on eggshells all the time. My apartment stayed clean because I was the only one making messes in it. I watched whatever I wanted on Netflix without anyone commenting on my choices. The month went by faster than I expected. Ryan kept his word about the no contact thing, which surprised me. On the day the month ended, I woke up to an email from him. It was long and actually thoughtful instead of defensive. He apologized for trying to change me and said he understood now that he'd been taking his own problems out on our relationship. Said he'd started seeing a counselor 2 weeks ago about his feelings of not being good enough. The email asked if we could meet to talk, but said he'd understand if I didn't want to. I read it 3 times sitting in bed, made myself coffee and read it again. Then I wrote back and said yes to meeting. I picked a coffee shop halfway between our apartments. Neutral ground where neither of us had any memories attached to the space. Got there 10 minutes early and ordered my usual latte and sat at a table near the window where I could see the street. My stomach felt tight and my hands kept fidgeting with my cup. Ryan walked in exactly on time, looking different somehow. His shoulders weren't as stiff, and he wasn't wearing that expression he'd had for months, where his jaw was always clenched. He got coffee and sat down across from me, and we both just looked at each other for a minute. He started talking first, and his voice was quieter than I remembered. Said he'd been doing a lot of thinking during the month apart, and working with his counselor helped him see things he couldn't see before. The traditional masculinity stuff wasn't really about me at all. It was about him feeling like he was failing at everything in his life, and trying to control our relationship to feel like he was good at something. His job review had been bad, and he got passed over for the promotion he wanted, and instead of dealing with those feelings, he decided the problem was that modern relationships were broken. Easier to blame podcasts and society than admit he felt inadequate. He looked right at me when he said he understood now that he'd been taking all his frustration and insecurity out on me and our relationship. That he'd been trying to make me smaller so he could feel bigger. His eyes got wet again and he wiped at them with his sleeve. Said he was genuinely sorry for all of it and that he missed who we used to be together before he messed everything up. I sat there listening, and part of me wanted to reach across the table and tell him it was okay, and we could try again. But another part of me remembered all those months of criticism and feeling like I was constantly defending my existence. Told him I appreciated his honesty and that I was glad he was working on himself with a counselor. Said I could see he'd done real thinking about this, and that meant something to me. But I also told him I wasn't sure if I could trust that this change would stick, or if he'd fall back into those patterns the next time he felt insecure about something. He nodded slowly like he'd expected me to say that. We sat there drinking our coffee and talking about smaller things for a while. How work was going for both of us and what we'd been doing during the month apart. It felt strange to talk to him like an acquaintance instead of someone I'd planned a future with. Eventually I said I thought we should stay broken up for now. That maybe someday when we'd both had more time to grow separately, we could reconnect as friends. But I needed to focus on myself right now. Ryan's face fell, but he didn't argue or try to convince me otherwise. Just said he understood, and that he hoped I'd be happy. We finished our coffee and stood up to leave, and he gave me a quick hug that felt sad and final. I walked back to my apartment alone and cried a little on the way home. But underneath the sadness was this feeling of certainty that I'd made the right choice for myself. That choosing my own peace and growth over trying to fix something broken was exactly what I needed to do.